we're back on the homestead. It is the weekend, after all. My allergies are killing me right now. Gotta get caught up in the garden. It's looking quite the frightful mess here. Although as we prepare for winter, I do want to have a little bit of winter growth on there to help protect the soil, as well as have something to plow under in spring. We have a few pears still left up on the tree. We had quite the massive harvest. We've been eating pears like crazy and making compote, and as well as the plums. Been absolutely delicious. We do have to collect the drop-offs and make our own palinka, Romanian style. True Transylvanian rot gut firewater. Of course, I can't help but continue to think about the Charlie Kirk situation. Took a little bit of a break from it. Of course, I was busy with work. I've been following the story, as I had promised you all in my last videos. But I've taken a little break and returned back to my more normal content for a little while. Give you guys a break as well. But now, as I learn more about the story, there's a lot more very important things to talk about as we continue our discussion about this dangerous precedent that is occurring. Firstly, I want to talk about that young gentleman, 19 years old, that trampled the memorial of Charlie Kirk. Literally trample the right and the freedom of other people's expressions to mourn an individual that meant something to them, that had meaning to their life, to meaning to their freedom, meaning to America. Quite ironic is what he did, because he is a leftist, of course, and the left do claim that the right is the fascists and here to suppress the rights of the people and so forth, yet they are the ones who are routinely suppressing the rights of the actual people themselves and co-opting this idea of rights for their own evil benefit. And of course, as the more they gain power, the more rights they strip away. And it's quite amazing that people would fight for that, thinking that it's going to benefit them in any way, and yet they're going to be roped in. I don't want to use the S word, but roped in and hog-tied up, essentially, if you know what I mean. The fact that he trampled somebody's grave out of total disrespect and meant to be disrespectful and meant to show that there's no rights here for you to mourn an individual or to express your feelings or express your thoughts. It again echoes that statement I had brought up many times before, just how dangerous of a precedent it is setting in this country, and that poisoning of our young people's minds. He is also still a victim of poisoning nonetheless. And for as much as he needs to be punished for what he did, which he certainly does, he should face consequences for his actions. He should also be re-educated, not re-educated in the mind brainwashing way or in the old communist or dictatorship tradition, but generally educated on the history of the people that he's following, the history of the beliefs that is following, where those beliefs actually came from, what do they actually mean, where does that kind of logic actually take you in reality. There are plenty of real world examples of this. It's not a obscure thing, it's not a occult knowledge, it's historical fact. It's written down, it's well documented. So we do need to take time to also reach out and educate this poor individual. And I do call him a poor individual because you have to be brainwashed to be able to do something like that. I mean, just absolutely brainwashed to the extreme. And that should serve as well as a wake-up call for us and a highlight to us of how dangerous this precedent is that was set by these far-left radicals, and how dangerous of a precedent it is to allow this sort of behavior and actions to flourish, but most importantly, to not correct it. Not correct it, not just with law and punishment. That is part of the correction. The stick as much as the carrot. But as much as we want to whack him with the stick, which he should get his few whacks, of course, we do need to bring out the olive branch as well, too. And show him that this is not the way. That you have, in fact, been poisoned. You have, in fact, been lied to. You've been deceived. What you're fighting for will only destroy and consume you. That's the goal. The goal is not to give you glory. It's for you to fight on their behalf to give them glory. And once they have it, they'll eat their own without hesitation. And that's, again, documented in historical fact, in historical stories, in the historical zeitgeist. Period. It's reality of the situation. So we do need to reach out to the others that are on this far left kind of agenda, that are brainwashed and poisoned, and help them wake up and help them realize that they have been poisoned, help them realize what it is that they actually are fighting for and believing in, what it is that they actually are going to achieve, ultimately, with this sickening goal. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up. The other thing I wanted to discuss is the other part of the program that I had mentioned earlier in the last episode, is the dangerous precedent extends not just to the left. It's not an issue of left versus right. It's not an issue of liberalism versus conservatism. Rather, it's an issue of extremism. And that extremism exists on all sides, on both sides, very much so. The other thing, for example, is what happened to Jimmy Kimmel, getting canned and fired by his programmer. Perhaps his comments and jokes are in very poor taste and not funny, perhaps, to many, and perhaps expresses something deeper within that needs to be explored and understood, which again was the other main point of my stance and my pieces. But most importantly, also reflects the fact that the side that is the right, for example, is quelling free speech just as much and freedom of expression. And it is a level of extremism that is causing that. This is where the dangerous precedent really comes in and really sets in. Because if we're not able to discuss, if we're not able to have people speak freely, to actually learn and understand what each other talks about and means and understands, we're just damning ourselves to a powder keg that will explode under our feet when we least expect it, when it's the least opportune, when it's the least capable of being dealt with and negotiated and handled. So as much as maybe he was in bad taste, I don't believe he should be punished to the point of having his life destroyed. Maybe he should be reprimanded, yes, that perhaps this was not proper discourse for him, especially in his position with his platform. But to essentially be canceled is, again, a level of extremism, and that is just as dangerous to freedom of speech and to the fundamentals of America and American discourse, which is fundamental to our formation of our nation, as much as anything that the left is doing. And again, just as much as the left has extremism, the right has it just as well. We have to be very wary now. Now is the most pivotal moment. Now is the most important time that we all need to wake up. And we all need to really see each other and see the situation for what it is and understand each other, hear each other, listen to each other, learn from each other, and most importantly, teach one another the right way. And to come to a consensus of which way we need to go as a nation and as a people. Because the right has extremism just as much, just as bad, just as evil. And this is not conspiracy, it's truth. You can see it. Not just can you see it, but it is historical fact, historical documentation that these extreme groups have been infiltrating all parts of American politics for decades, with intention to do so. This is not just pulled out of my ass, this is real documented history. And right now is a very dangerous time, because that extremism is slowly creeping forward. It's gaining more power, it's flying under the radar. Now, granted, the extremism on the right has not had as much of a platform and as much of an ability and as much of a spotlight as the left has had in the last 5-6 years especially. But that's about to change very quickly. And now is the time that you, my fellow citizens, need to wake up and look carefully, hear clearly. Most importantly, think and understand, and know facts, know history, know logic, and use it. Use it as your most powerful weapon, your most powerful protectant. That's something that can never be taken away from you. And most importantly, that is the most powerful tool that will actually save us all. For if we all know, for if we all see, for if we all hear, not one can be led astray. Not one can be poisoned anymore. And sometimes all it takes is just one to be poisoned. And throughout history, these leftist groups and rightist groups and every branch and flavor of extremism has infiltrated and intentionally tried multiple times over those courses of time to take over American politics and take America into their ideal direction, which is death and destruction and darkness. It's documented. And so many times have so many efforts been put forth, and sometimes to even extreme ends, to wash them out, to rid them out, to get them out of power. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does get them out for a while. Sometimes it only pushes them underground. But the most important thing that's being forgotten here is that it's not the actor, it is the idealism. That is the issue. You can get rid of the actor all you want, but if you don't get rid of the idealism, if you don't wake people up to think, to realize, to understand, to ask questions and demand answers, and to have logic and presence of mind, that poisoning will continue. It doesn't matter what actor you take out of the picture. This extremism, this ideologies are viruses. You can take away the host, and perhaps the pandemic slows down. But unless you protect all hosts from ever being infected again, it will just move to the next one and propagate once more. And just like a vaccine in many ways, this is your vaccine of knowledge, vaccine of the mind, vaccine of the soul. Is to arm yourself with the true information and to keep your eyes open. Be awake. Don't be woke. Awaken. Awaken, America. That will protect you against the virus of extremism and against the viral epidemic. And viral in the very similar mechanistic way as a real virus infects their hosts and spreads amongst the others. So that is an important thing that I wanted to build up upon, especially in the presence of new information right now. I wish that that's where it would end. But as we all know, this story, this fight, this struggle for survival is not a one-chapter ordeal. And yet we see more misinformation, more misknowledge being pushed forth by the people supposedly there to protect us and to enforce law, to make law even. That, again, is very dangerous. I've studied a little bit more about what happened to Charlie Kirk. The scenery, the environment, the shot, the angles, the evidence, the narrative pushed by the FBI. It's amazing. Do they really think that we're that stupid? Sad part is, they might be right in most cases. And that was by design. Did you ever wonder why so much brain rot exists? Starting all the way back in the days of reality TV. It's amazing that that never really sold. It became sold to us, and therefore we consume it voraciously now. And that is why it continues to sell. But really when it first came around, even reality TV, shoo little bee shoo. It's amazing that even back in the day, reality TV didn't really get much of a foothold. It really had to be jammed down your throat. It really had to be so sugar-coated to at least be somewhat palatable and then slammed down your gullet. It had to be taking over pretty much every corner so you had nowhere else to hide but to watch that driveling crap, that rotting, brain-destroying, emulsifying garbage. And it worked. Eventually it took on. Eventually that became the norm. That became expected. That became desired. And that continues today on TikTok, on YouTube, Instagram, everywhere. And because of that design, the people in power, which are not benevolent, mind you, they're not infallible. Hell, they may even be genuinely evil. Some of them, not all. But the ones that are, played this game very well. And they do believe that we're just that stupid. They have no reason not to. They think, at least, we don't have any recourse. They think that we don't have any other access to good information, to better information, to logic, to knowledge. It's been so well suppressed and hidden, hasn't it? Fahrenheit 451, but not by fire, but by smut. Isn't that something? But fortunately, that knowledge has not been destroyed. I carry forth that knowledge, and so must you. And the knowledge is still there. Perhaps you may have to go into very old resources. I know, how dare I challenge you to read a book. But you may actually have to. However, hopefully this channel carries forth. So far I have not been fully banned. It seems like they may have actually lifted the shadow banning, so that's good. Rather ironic that they did that after I came out with that video, but whatever, I'm not going to assume anything. Perhaps it was just an error in processing or whatever. But as long as I continue to stand here in front of you, I will continue to challenge your thinking and continue to bring you the truth and challenge you to seek the truth even further. And hopefully there are more and more channels like me, and there seems to be. A lot of larger creators are taking up that same fight, the same argument, even more so than they ever have before that I've seen, which is fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for doing so. But the most important thing is you, the audience, to become that sort of mind that cannot be tainted because you question what it is you're consuming. And because of what has been forced down our throats, that brain rot, they really do think that we're just walking, drooling zombies of mush. So they push this narrative that makes no sense, given the actual situation, given the actual evidence of what happened. And I shall include some cutouts and some pictures and clips here in this video, which I finally figured out how to do that. I'm still new to YouTube. I've only been doing this for about 6 months, and I started from nothing, no experience whatsoever, none. And we're about to round 10,000 subscribers. That is so amazing. Thank you, everyone, for supporting this channel and this endeavor. I will put up the clips and videos that I had found and pictures that I had found and insert them in the video here so you too can see the evidence. And of course, I will provide whatever the ones I know the source of, right now verbally, as well as on screen. And whatever ones I miss, perhaps I find some new ones that I add later on during editing, please look in the description to find the citation. Because nonetheless, I want to be not just bringing you forth good evidence and things to create you to think, but I also want to provide the ones who actually had created this in the first place their dues, their proper credit. Because not everything is from my own mind, just like it's not from your mind as well. We learn things from one another, and we must share the good information with one another. That's why I promote you to share the video and these types of videos. And I too will share the good things that I have seen from others, but I will credit them because they deserve it. They've done the hard work. They took the risk. So if you don't see it credited here on screen or verbally, please check the comments description in case I find something new as I'm editing that I want to include. But either way, they shall all be cited. Anyway, as thank you to American Thor, he broke the story first. And most importantly, what he brought up was a very, very important and intriguing point. Several points, really. About the Charlie Kirk tragedy. I want to be careful about what I say, of course, to not trigger the algorithm to try to shadow ban me once again, because that took quite some battling to get it alleviated. And it did happen, fortunately, but I don't know how much I can push my luck sometimes. So we'll try to be a little careful. But nonetheless, thank you, American Thor, aka Valhalla VFT, because I got this information from your Valhalla channel, as well as some from your American Thor channel. So again, thank you for doing the hard work and posting these up, and I want to make sure that you get credit for what is due to you. Anyway, the FBI narrative has some funny things to it. They claim that it was a direct shot across the neck this way, from the shooter, across Charlie Kirk's neck. Entered from the side, yet did not exit. And that it was a .30-06 that had done it. On top of that, there was also a discussion of perhaps Charlie Kirk may be wearing some plated body armor, or armor plating, to be a little more concealable, and perhaps that ricocheted up into his neck. That was my thought as well too, but perhaps it was a center of mass shot that had ricocheted. Very plausible. And from the camera angle I had seen, it was hard to tell if he was wearing anything underneath his t-shirt. But now we know so much more, and many things are not making sense. There are more holes in this story than there is in a piece of Swiss cheese devoured by maggots. So let's not be the maggots devouring that governmental cheese, shall we? Let's actually look at the real evidence. Number one, coming across the neck. Very funny, because if you look here, we can clearly see the entry point is just as I had anticipated in the first video. It is from the front of the neck, going backwards. Now, when I had first made my assumptions on the shot and whether or not Charlie Kirk may have survived, from what I had heard, seen, and observed in the video, the shot sounded like, from the perspective of the cameraman, it sounded like it came from shallower than a 45-degree angle directly behind, coming parallel to him, and then across to Charlie Kirk.
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Oh my God.
That's why I had assumed maybe it was the center of mass that had deflected up into his neck. I had also brought up the other idea, that perhaps it was a direct hit. And if it was a direct hit, not only will it sever the jugular and the carotid, but it could also deflect up into the brainstem and cause an instant kill that you cannot recover from no matter what. Now they tell us it's from the side of the neck. But I knew from then, from that very moment when I saw that first video, it's very clear that it had come almost dead on, perhaps a slight angle off to the right-hand side from the perspective of the cameraman that was taking that image. So clearly it had come pretty much directly on, perhaps a slight angle. That's why I assumed that maybe it had transected the brainstem. But we can see from this picture, like I mentioned earlier, it's dead on in the front, right about here. That's clearly not here. So what are they trying to fool? Exactly. What are they trying to imply? That it perhaps came from a further out location? That it wasn't this particular shooter that had done it? We know where he was. We heard the shot. We know from which direction it came. We could see the entry wound. We know where it had landed. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know trajectory is a straight line. And very clearly, it was shallower than a 45-degree angle, shallower perhaps even than a 30-degree angle, on the right-hand side of the cameraman behind. Not here. There's no way. Additionally, we know now that Charlie Kirk was not wearing body armor. That has been confirmed. And from some closer-up images from people up in the front row, it's very clear he's not wearing anything underneath. So it's not a deflection. That was another thing that perhaps was brought up, not just by me, but I heard later, potentially by the investigators. Clearly not. He never got up to change or switch out. He just was never wearing body armor, which perhaps was a mistake on his part. But again, it wouldn't have helped him in the situation anyway. But again, it shows you how much faith he had in his mission, how much faith he had in you, America, to listen, to open up your minds and to discuss and be mature people. Be like the founders of this country and fight with your words, with your logic, with your passions, with your rhetoric. To not divide, but to unify. And to drive America forward in a positive direction. He had so much faith in you that he did not even concern himself with possibly being shot. At least not in terms of wearing body armor. At least not in terms of protecting himself and not going in that particular area where clearly there's plenty of vantage points up top. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. Your faith, I hope we can prove to you wherever you are now that it has not been misplaced. At least not on us all. They say it was a 30-06. Even if you're not familiar with guns a whole lot, or with rifles a whole lot. To give you an idea, 30-06 is quite a beast. I forgot to bring my ammo up here. I do have a 30-06, a very old one, that's been sporterized. But it is quite a round. The whole casing and everything is about yay long, and about pretty fat. The bullet is just a 30 caliber bullet, but it's a long, big boy. The casing, though, is what makes the rapport, and that's the thing I want you to pay attention to. Listen to the rapport, to the sound. A 30-06 brings the thunder. That is not a quiet thing. There's no way to make it a quiet thing. That is a big, powerful round. That is a loud, loud round. This is a small caliber. Potentially, maybe a 5.56 like I had originally thought. Maybe suppressed. Maybe perhaps of the sound and some interference, maybe a sound a little bit lighter than it is. But that too now doesn't make sense because there's no exit point. And they say that the 30-06 round did not exit. Let me show you something. Because it is a very powerful round that can drop an elk, even larger than an elk, very quickly. Let me show you an example of what happens. Yeah. There's no way it doesn't exit. 5.56, even that would exit and create quite a big wound because it does tumble and it carries a lot of energy with it. But that too I can maybe see potentially if it was subsonic ammunition, suppressed, and maybe it had tumbled and deflected and got caught in the vertebrae, perhaps. But clearly it is not a 30-06. It is maybe a .22 caliber rifle or some kind of pistol round off of a carbine, maybe a subsonic suppressed 5.56, potentially. It is not a 30-06. And you may say, well, what about if they suppress that too? You can suppress it all day long with a thing that's 10 feet long if you wish. That round brings the thunder no matter what you do. And when there's thunder, it will strike you like a lightning bolt from above. It is a powerful, loud round. It doesn't play. So there's absolutely no way it was a 30-06 period. There's just no way. The other thing is, they don't want to back up their narrative with the autopsy report. Please, then, if you so are inclined to push such a narrative upon us and think we are so stupid, well, then perhaps address this as more logical men and women, he, hims, they, them, these, hims, of logic and enlightenment. And perhaps present to us then the autopsy report. Why do you clutch it so dearly? Additionally, they dare to tell us that somehow he was able to break down a 30-06 rifle, pack it small into a tiny backpack. It did not have tremendous weight on the backpack. It's not bogged down heavily. And unless it's a very new modernized rifle with a very short barrel, it's not a quick takedown kind of thing. It's not a small package either. Now, they say that they found a screwdriver on the roof, that perhaps he reassembled it in the bushes, somehow got up on the roof, nobody noticed anything, nobody stopped him, nobody questioned him, spent time to screw together the rifle and screw the barrel back on, put the stock back together, get everything all set up, line up, and take a very, very perfect intentional shot. Because probably he too assumed that maybe Charlie Kirk was wearing body armor, so he didn't go for center of mass. Maybe he decided to go for the head or something else, maybe he missed slightly, or maybe that was his intended target. But that is a hard target to hit accurately. The fact that this kid may supposedly never had much experience with guns, was a leftist, was very anti-gun in the first place, which is quite ironic, that he would pick to use one. Perhaps it was to push the narrative forward of taking guns away from Americans. Second Amendment shall never be treaded upon. Ever. Don't let that happen. But nonetheless, they think that we're really that stupid. Then, if that's the case, then why did nobody stop? Why did nobody see? Why did nobody question? Unless they let him do that. It would be the only rationale. So then you mean to tell me that he had that time to assemble, take the shot, very good shot nonetheless, disassemble, go back down the alleyway so somebody sees the gun on him, hide in the bushes again, reassemble it, or drive far enough away to dispose of the rifle, then drive 3 hours back home. Nobody stopped. Nobody questioned anything during this entire time. Now, I can understand people can slip in and out, and it takes time for investigators to get up and figure out what the hell's going on. But really? I mean, if that were to be true, then you're really telling me that either A, you are so incompetent at security and policing that you let him slip through, or that you let him slip through intentionally. Tell us, which one? Which narrative do you prefer? Because it does raise some very, very dour questions, doesn't it? Some very damning ones at that. First of all, that wouldn't have been able to fit in a backpack like that. It was definitely something that's more collapsible, smaller, maybe a pistol caliber carbine of some kind. Maybe a 5.56 short barrel, maybe with a quick takedown. Maybe a .22 takedown, .22, like a Ruger. Believe it or not, a 22 can carry quite a distance, and it can do quite a bit of damage. 22 is no joke. If you think about it as a little powder-propelled pellet gun, essentially, but no, it puts out some force. It can carry some distance. It can kill. It can do a lot of damage, actually. It is not a toy, even a 22 caliber. So even that could have done the job very easy, especially with that kind of shot. No problem. It would have done it, no problem. Now, a Ruger Takedown 22, yeah, that can in the backpack. As a matter of fact, it's designed for that exact purpose. It's a backpack camping gun or a truck gun. But a 30-06, no. There's no way. There's just no way. Impossible. Unless he had something very highly customized. But at that point, it would be an SPR, which requires a special tax stamp. And you mean to say they couldn't track him down, couldn't figure this out, couldn't rise up some suspicions maybe? Never? No background checks, nothing? Really? I doubt that. I highly doubt that. I can tell you, as a firearms owner, one who has 30-06, a 44 Magnum carbine, a lot of different things. It's not that easy. You don't just walk into a gun store or a gun show and walk out with a gun. At least not here in my state. Maybe in other states it's a little bit easier, but even then, there's still a background check involved. There's still some process involved. Didn't always used to be that way, but it is now, nonetheless. Even back in the olden days, it wasn't quite that easy. Easier, but still. Only way back could you go to Saturday Night Special and buy from the hardware store a 25 caliber pistol or something. That was a different time, sure. But not anything recent within our generation, and especially not in that young man's generation, would that have been even possible to do. Unless, of course, you got bought it illegally. There's other avenues, of course. I'm not saying that it would be impossible full stop, but it just doesn't add up, doesn't make sense, especially when combined with the rest of the context. So, let's ask the FBI, do they really think we're that stupid? The other very questionable thing is, of course, that he drove 3 hours away and immediately proclaimed to his father of how proud he is of what he had done. And the FBI or police or whomever knew exactly when to go pick him up, where to pick him up, where he was, who he was. That's also an interesting question, and if I can find that video, if it's still up, I'll post it here as well.
Those of us who served in the military are a little bit aware of hand signals being thrown up. And these two men need to really be looked into with some of the sniper-looking signals, especially coming from the guy in the white and the guy in the black.
Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great. Over the last 10 years.
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
There was some odd hand signaling happening between one of Charlie Kirk's security, an individual in the crowd, and perhaps the shooter themselves. Now, that may be a little bit trekking into conspiracy theory, and I do want to caution you all to not fall into conspiracy theories, not now. Let's look at things very logically and look at the evidence. Nonetheless, it is something to consider. It is something to keep in mind and something to think about. We need to look at all sides of the coin, whether plausible or not, and dissect it thoroughly and understand it thoroughly to make sure that we know what it is that is happening and know the actual story that is unfolding. But it is quite curious, isn't it? It again raises the question, was this intentional? The other thing is, was it actually that kid that did it? Or is he just the scapegoat? Charlie made a lot of enemies on all sides of the aisle. No matter if you think or proclaim, or if you did, in fact, laud Trump. To laud means to give praise to. And he fought and voted for Trump, perhaps, yes, maybe. But maybe he was getting a little bit too dangerous to have around. That's another very, very real possibility. Again, that's a little bit of conspiracy theory, so do take it with a grain of salt and dissect it thoroughly before you follow along and fall down the rabbit hole. But nonetheless, it's something else to consider. And that is, unfortunately, a very, very real thing that has happened throughout history. All history. Not just now, but during the communist era, during dictatorships, during every form of radicalized government. That does happen. And that's exactly what I warn you, the young audience, about following this very radicalized left agenda or right agenda. There's radicalism on all sides, right and left. And neither one is good, neither one is bad, but they're all nonetheless poison. That's exactly what I caution you about. Is no matter how much you laud the system, no matter how much you fight for it, no matter how much of a true soldier you are for the mission, eventually, when the mission ends, you become a liability. And liabilities need to be mitigated. So please keep that in mind. And that is a very, very real thing. I don't know if that's what happened here, but that is a very, very real thing that does happen and has happened throughout history, throughout many, many different systems. There's a lot to dissect here. A lot more I'm going to pour into the story. Of course, I do work a full-time job as well, so there's not a whole lot of time. And of course, editing takes a long time on my editing platform. It's very slow and crashes a lot. I do need to invest into a better computer, especially as I'm rounding the corner to 10,000 subs, which puts me then into the top creators, which means the top 3% of all channels, which is further stratified into mid-tier creator for 10,000 and above, and big creator or top creator or large creator at 100,000 and above. So that's how YouTube kind of further stratifies it. But just in general speak, when you cross 10,000, you become no longer just a small guy off in the distance, off into the void. You actually become a serious content creator that YouTube recognizes and also gives you much more power, much more voice, much more platform, much more access to tools, much more support, and much more possibilities of generating revenue. Far more than if you're below 10,000. So it is quite a milestone, even though it's not celebrated with a play button. But nonetheless, I want to use this platform for good, not just good in teaching, not just good in informing you, but good in inspiring you to be an enlightened individual. And to not be fooled, to not be poisoned, to not fall into the rhetoric. I've seen it happen far too many times. It never, never ends up well. And there's a reason why I call it poison, and not an elixir of life. The other very real question I want you all to consider is, they truly expect us to believe that this young man, I don't know how experienced he is with firearms or not, he does seem to be kind of within the area of the country where that is more common, and hunting is more common. But they really expect us to believe that he is such a crack shot. Perhaps he is, really. But it almost begs you to think, and begs you to question, was he actually the one who took the shot, or was he just the planned scapegoat? That, again, kind of thing does happen. It has happened throughout history. Additionally, also the individual did manage to pull off things of that nature in history as well. Both could be true, and until we know for sure, well, we have to keep questioning. But it is another thing to consider, another very important point of thought and discussion. Anyway, just for you to consider a little more. Anyway, as I continue to follow the story, I find myself triggered once again to delve into philosophy and to dissect human behavior, human thoughts, human politics, humanity itself. That is why I like to wander the woods, wander the homestead, wander the rivers, and think, and question, and demand answers. And that is why I encourage you all to do exactly the same. Never stop asking questions.